Welcome back to the Wizard Shop. Today is the big reveal on which engine we chose to put in the Malibu. Let's get started. So if you watched the previous video on this 1966 Malibu four-door hardtop, or as they called it, a sports sedan, you saw in that video that I'm going to be putting an engine in this car. And I also mentioned in that video, which if you haven't watched it already, you should go watch it now. It explains a lot what's going on here. The engine is more than 8 cylinders. It is not a diesel, and it uses a Chevy transmission even from the factory. So many of you suggested a Viper V10. No, we're not putting that in there. That's way too expensive. And it also doesn't bolt to a Chevy transmission. It's not going to be a Ferrari engine or something wild like that. Someone actually mentioned, hey, it's probably going to be the Rolls-Royce engine that he has sitting in the back. That only has 8 cylinders. It doesn't have more than 8 cylinders, so that one's out. And anybody that mentioned anything about Duramax or Cummins or anything, no, I said it's not going to be a diesel, so it's not going to be that. But some of you did guess correctly, and we're going to show you here in a minute the one that I chose and what we're going to have to do to make this work. So before we reveal the engine, let's talk about the car. Like I mentioned, it's a 1966 Chevrolet Malibu, which is a Chevelle with a Malibu option package. This one came with a 283 and a Power Glide, and it is the four-door hardtop or sports sedan. And apparently these are pretty rare. I actually had a guy who lives not too far from here, came all the way to the shop and was like, I want to buy your car before you do anything with it. And I was like, no. I have plans for this car. It's going to be super awesome when I'm done. I'm not just going to kick it to the curb. He expressed to me how rare the four-door hardtop is. So I went and looked up the numbers, and the guy is actually onto something. The SS396 of this year, you think, well, that must be a rare one. There's only a few of those made. No, there was 66,000 of those made, roughly. Quite a lot. The standard two-door hardtop Malibu, which had been a 283 or any other kind of engine, over 150,000. A lot of cars. But the four-door hardtop or sports sedan Malibu, only 19,000. That's it. So all these other models are 60,000, 150,000, 40,000. This one didn't even break 20, guys. There's really not very many of them. The guy that came up and was wanting to buy this from me, he told me if any of the glass gets broken, there is no reproductions, and you have to go find a salvage car or a complete another car that someone will sell you so you can rob the glass out of it. So I'm starting to learn that this is a pretty cool car. I bought it and thought, oh, a four-door, they're not very valuable. Be a lot cheaper. But it turns out that it's actually kind of a rare model. So some of you say, this isn't a muscle car, and just totally write off the car. I've had people offering me money for this car because it is special. It is that special. And I consider it a muscle car. I don't care about two-door, four-door, and I don't care about someone's article that they wrote that designates two doors as a muscle car, four doors is not. The reality is the four doors were made for insurance purposes. You could have the same car, the same motor, but with four doors, because insurance was really expensive in the 60s if you had a two-door. If you went to a four-door, you could negate the insurance expenses and still have a really fast, really cool car. And no matter what, there's not many of these left, and to write the whole car off because it's not two doors, I think that's very foolish. So now is the time for the big reveal, and here we go. A crusty old engine. Let's take a look. This is a 1983 Jaguar 5.3 liter high efficiency V12. I'm using this engine right now just to fab everything up and figure out how to mount it. I actually have J&J Autos going to be sending me the 6 liter version of this engine, which is identical. It just has internals are different, and I'll have to move this distributor over to it to simplify, but this is basically what's going to go into this car.
Car Wizard?
Yep.
It's missing something.
Oh, the Lucas Electronics, the Lucas fuel injection system. Yes,
Yes.
that's not going to be used on this at all. But before we get into that, let's talk about mounting. And as you can see, there is a hole in the firewall. In this picture, you can see you can buy universal transmission tunnels with the firewall that welds right into place. It's made for these types of swaps. So that's what I'm going to be using. This is very common for people to use these types of tunnels in different transmissions, bigger transmissions. So it may not look very pretty at the moment, but it'll be fine when I get done. If you look down here, the motor mount is very close to the cross member. I'll just have to put a plate that extends out. And you can see it's the same thing on the other side. Once I weld in a plate, the mount itself, as you can see in my hand, is just a hockey puck. It's rubber with 2 studs on it. It's very simple, very easy to make these motor mounts work. Very easy. So the transmission cross member is easily moved anywhere I want along the whole frame. I'll put that where I need it for the Chevy transmission. It's going to have either a 700R4 or a 400. I'm having to decide which way I want to go with that. Once I get that located and get my motor mounts located here, then I can weld in my transmission tunnel and get all that taken care of. But as you can see right now with these standard fuel injection intake manifolds, that will not work in this car. I have a lot of friends that have thought about doing Jaguar V12 swaps into T-bucket roadsters or different types of rat rods or things, and they always look at pictures and they see these intakes and they're like, oh my goodness, I don't see how that could work. Number one, it's so wide. And number two, I searched around on the internet and I just don't see any other viable options to take these intakes off and put carburetors on it. I have seen on the internet that a few people have do-it-yourself backyard fabrications. They weld these goofy looking boxes together and they make something work to put hollies on it, and it looks horrible, really bad. So first thing I'm going to do is take these off. There's that one. We'll throw them in the pile that's next to Mrs. Wizard here with all the Lucas garbage. Look at all that, guys. Lucas garbage. We'll throw that in there with the Lucas garbage. We'll take this one off. So now it's starting to look really cool. It looks like a really long V8. Well, it basically is. It's a V12. But you say, okay, you got the intakes off. What now? How are you going to make this work? Are you going to fab up an intake? So like I mentioned, I've had a lot of friends that have wanted to do something with these engines. They just don't see a viable option with putting carburetors on it. It's hard to eliminate the Lucas injection system because you have to use those intakes. But there is somebody out there that is now making intakes for this engine. And the company is called Affinity Imports. Here they are. Dual quad setup, Edelbrock style square bore carburetors. And as you can tell, these are not some backyard do-it-yourself, cobble some things together to make them work. These are of quality of Offenhauser or Edelbrock. These are cast-made, machined for this engine. As you can see, it says AI. It's molded into the mold there. Affinity Imports. Let me show you what they're going to look like on here. There's one. And there's the other. And as you see, I didn't have to modify or cut or try to hammer it on with a hammer. They slid on perfectly. They are machined perfectly for this engine.
They look like some serious little spiders crawling on this engine.
Yeah, they kind of do. It leaves room for the distributor in the middle. But now it's starting to look like an awesome hot rod engine.
Now, Car Wizard, it looks like it's going to take a couple of 4-barrels.
Yes, it will take 2 500 CFM Edelbrocks. If you look in this picture right here, this is actually from Affinity Imports website. This is my goal of what I want to do with this engine. It'll have red valve covers, 2 hollies with 2 air cleaners, and it's going to be really, really sweet. In the description below, there's actually a link to this guy's website, Affinity Imports. You can buy these. You don't have to spend hours and hours searching for solutions to this. There already is a solution. Just get in contact with Troy at Affinity Imports, and he will be happy to send you some as soon as you pay for them. They're not free. You have to pay for them. So it's like a snap of a finger. Your intake manifold problems are solved. Just like that.
And no more Lucas.
No more Lucas. The distributor is still a Lucas design. Like I showed in my last Jag video, the ignition module that runs this is off of an 85 K5 Blazer. It's just a simple GM HEI ignition module. Very easy. This will be the only remaining Lucas electronics on this engine once we get it going. The exhaust manifolds, I may have to do some modifications or maybe even make my own manifolds. It won't be that big of a deal. So we've got the firewall, the exhaust, and the motor mounts. And that's it. As you can see, there's plenty of room here for a radiator. It's really not going to be that hard, guys, at all. These will have 2 carburetors on it. It'll have HEI ignition, basically like on a Chevy 350. Very simple. It's going to be very powerful. Being that I'm going to use the 6-liter from J&J Auto as soon as they send it here, they're also sending a transmission and several other parts. They will have over 300 horsepower and around 340, 350 pounds of torque. It will be similar to a really nice warmed up LT1 Power, but it's going to be so cool when I open the hood, and it has dual quad intakes on a Jag V12. And the engines are cheap. These are not $10,000 engines. You can find them on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or wherever you get car parts from. 500 bucks, a grand. Hasn't ran in a couple of years. The Lucas electronics went haywire. I gave up on it. But the core of the engine is still fine.
What's really funny, though, Wizard, is that a lot of people took those out of their Jags to put small block Chevy 350s in, and it's funny that you're putting it into one.
Yeah, so I'm taking a V12 Jag and putting it where a small block Chevy used to go. It's backwards. Based that I knew that that was done on the XJSs or the XJ12s, they put 350s in them. I figured, well, why can't I put one where a 350 goes? And there are some modifications I'll have to do, but it's not extensive. I don't have to cut the frame or cut the cross members. I do have to make an area on the firewall. But that's it. It's not really that big of a deal. It's going to be simple because there's not a whole lot of electronics on this car. And we've also eliminated the Lucas electronics. So it's going to be very simple, carbureted with a basic ignition system. We are going to put air conditioning, and we're also going to have an alternator on there, and that's it. I'm going to use the standard manual steering and the manual brakes.
Gosh, the most advanced thing in that car is going to be your radio.
Yeah, I'll probably put a Bluetooth stereo in it. But as you can see, even in its raw form, not bolted in, it looks amazing. It looks really awesome. When I first set it down in there and I stood back, I was like, wow, this is sweet. When I get to Cars and Coffee and open the hood on this thing, there's just... The Honda Civic guys are... Isn't that right, Tegan? Why don't you come over here and talk about that? This is my new mechanic, Tegan.
Hello.
So if you were at Cars and Coffee, you'd probably be checking this out over the Civics, right?
Yes, because the Civics don't have a V12 in them, and this is just the perfect car guy combination. Not some Civic that's stock with a B and a tin can exhaust.
Yeah. So once this gets painted up red and some carburetors, it'll actually kind of look like a muscle car engine, just really long.
Oh yeah.
It's gonna be really cool. Well, I don't want to keep you from your work. I'll let you get back to your work, but I thought I'd get your take on that.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So this is the fan that came off of this V12 engine. I will not be using it. It's too big. There's no room. I will be putting this in the trash because all the blades are cracked and tore up. It's no good anymore, really. But I'm going to put the radiator in place. There's plenty of room, as you saw, but I'm going to be having electric fans installed on this side of the condenser and also the radiator, so it'll have nice airflow, and that will be electronic as well. I'll have some temperature switches put in on the engine. So it's really going to be a simple setup. but it's going to have a lot of power. It's going to be really cool.
So, Car Wizard, does it hurt the car to have the firewall cut like that?
No. This is one of the cars in the years that it doesn't use the body as the frame. It has a solid steel frame underneath of it. It's like an old ladder frame or the old frames you think of in any trucks or cars from the 60s. That's basically what it is. And we're also going to be welding in a transmission tunnel and a shroud that goes around the engine. It'll be structural again. It'll be welded into place. So it's not going to be an open hole all the time.
Will it create heat issues inside the car?
No more than it had before. You probably don't want to do this on a modern car because there's so much modules and HVAC box and actuators and things in the way. There's really nothing in the way on this one. Let's take a look at the interior. So I have the heater box down on this so I can cut the firewall. I may have to modify it a little bit, but luckily it's metal and I can weld plates on or whatever I need to do. You can see it's at the open hole there where the transmission's going to go. It just needs to be a little larger with an aftermarket universal shroud and it'll be fine. But you mentioned temperature and heat coming into the cab. I have brand new carpet that's going to go down here that's pre-molded, pre-made from Speedway Motors. I'm going to put Dynamat down for insulation, for sound, and for heat, and then I'm going to put the carpet over the top of that. I'm not going to modify really anything in the interior. It's going to be pretty much stock. The real surprise is going to be when you open the hood and your eyes pop out of your head and you're like, what is that? What engine is that? There's going to be a lot of those questions, I already know. So we stripped the interior. I've got the seats at my upholsterer here in town, Low End Upholstery, having them redone. I've got the new headliner. I'll probably have them put it on for me to make sure it's done right. I'll do the carpet and Dynamat and all that stuff and all the dash work. I'll put on a new dash. But it'll look nice. It'll be in good shape and be a really cool car when the hood comes open. Not only is it going to look really cool, it's going to sound amazing. It's going to have Zonda sounds, guys. It's going to sound amazing. Again, if you're interested in these intakes, you're doing a rat rod, you're doing a T-bucket roadster or something really cool, an old truck. As you can see, there is a solution to the intake problems on these engines. They are now going to be a usable engine. You can buy these from Affinity Imports in the link in the description below. It makes it so much easier. This is what sold me on this swap, is the fact that this can happen. This is amazing. This is a huge breakthrough. So thanks for following along on the really cool swap we're going to be doing into this car. I'm glad you guys could see some of the solutions I've come up with to make this work and some of the really cool intakes that I've found from Affinity Imports. If you're curious what kind of tools we're using to make this happen, check my Amazon affiliates link in the description below. And if you haven't hit the subscribe button already, I really recommend you do that now because you're going to want to keep up with this swap. And there's so many more cool projects going on in the shop right now. Thanks for watching.